Welcome to the Novice to Office podcast. I am your host, Trey Bam. It is a new era. Novice to Office has been rebooted. Enlightenment is available at rebooted prices. So don't forget to like, subscribe, share. As the car salesman in West Chicago said to me when I bought an S10 pickup from him, here's some of my cards. Give them out. Lord love ya. Today, we discuss federal spending and debt. I have put enormous energy into making sure this isn't a sleeper. For one, it is a shorter episode by design to force me to come up with new ways to keep it interesting and make sure you are left with understanding why federal spending and federal debt matter and the time bomb element that it brings to our civilization. As far as our rebooted connection to current events goes, the incoming Trump administration, led by the action of Elon Musk and formerly Vivek Ramaswamy, they have promised to revamp the government and cut trillions of dollars from the federal budget. In the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, here are some of their zeets or posts or whatever. This is the official handle of DOGE. Here are various calls to action based on what are apparently the most egregious examples of government waste and craziness. Here's some border security in Paraguay, money for a magic museum in South Dakota, which, of course, is home of the Senate Majority Leader. Doge is worked up about the penny. Anyway, these are those headline grabbing, oh, look, what a waste. The DC swamp is crazy. Oink, 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 oink. All questionable spending, of certainly good attention getters. But as bad as these things are, congressional earmarks, pork barrel spending, whatever, they are not the real problem when it comes to federal spending. They're just not. And we could zero out anything that looks the slightest bit questionable. It doesn't matter the political side, liberal or conservative. We could zero all that out, and we would not come close to controlling spending in a basic sense. But first, what is the budget? Very simply, here is how it breaks down. This is a super simplified explanation. It cost last year $6.75 trillion to run the government. $6.75 trillion. This is the highest it's ever been in human history by any government. And it's been up above $6 trillion in the past 5 years, starting with Trump's last year, which was during COVID. This 6.75 breaks down as follows: 1.5 trillion for Social Security, 875 billion for Medicare, which is the old people's health insurance, 820 for Medicaid, which is poor people's health insurance, 385 billion for veterans health care and disability, $825 billion for the military, $950 billion just to pay back the debts, which we'll talk more about here in a minute. All of this totals $5.35 trillion. So we still got another $1.4 trillion in other spending. And this other spending is education, farm subsidies, food stamps, or SNAP, it's called, Obamacare, airports, roads, waterways, disaster spending, foreign aid. All that group equals $1.4 trillion. So where does the money come from? Well, it comes from taxes, of course, but also borrowing, because we spend more than we take in. And here is what and how we take it in. $2.4 trillion from income tax, $1.4 trillion from payroll taxes. Okay, this is FICA on your paycheck, and it is dedicated taxation to those first three spending categories I told you about: Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And obviously, if you were paying attention, we didn't take in enough here even to cover just Social Security. $530 billion in corporate income taxes. Corporations are taxed on their profits unless you are the sole shareholder, in which case most people file at an income rate to get around corporate taxes. Then we've got another $250 billion of assorted fees and taxes, such as customs duties, tariffs, which we've been hearing a lot about, We'll do another episode on that. All of that income totaled $4.9 trillion last year. It is 17% of the U.S.'s gross domestic product. In other words, the federal government takes out 17% of all the money Americans produce in order to fund itself. And if you've been following the math, we therefore are short, or were short last year, almost $1.9 trillion, almost $2 trillion. Now, I admit that all these trillions of billions, or most people, they make you guys glass over. They're hard to understand. So let's talk about it in the everyday American sense. Let's say that you have a job that brings home $5,000 a month. That's a good job. That's a real good job. $5,000 a month. So you get your paycheck, and right off the top, you write a check for $1,600 to your parents, just to take care of them, just for being your parents. Now, you've got a family that's got health issues and your health insurance, so you got to pay another $840 a month for that. Now, you also have to pay the medical bills of your friend who's broke all the time down the road. So you got to write another $820 check for his health care. Now, most people don't have a home security system that costs $825 a month. Now, some designer shotguns are that. But let's just say that's your rent, $825 a month. Most people get security by getting where they can lock the door. I really don't know of anywhere where you can get out of the rain for just $825 out of the rain without roaches. But that's what your security costs. Your utilities are $250 a month, but you still need a car and food. But now you're out of money because you have to spend your last $735 to pay the minimums on your credit cards. Why are you using your credit card so much? Well, you can get a loan for the car, but you got to use a credit card to buy all your food. Well, that's not very smart to put your groceries on your credit card, but that's what you got to do. So you can see that this is not really workable. Or it may be exactly like your family situation. So where do we get the money to cover our government bills when we're short? We get it from the U.S. Treasury Department's super duper credit card bond issuance. A government doesn't go to the bank to get a loan when it needs money, when it needs $1.9 trillion. It instead issues bonds, which are a kind of a micro loan from individuals to the government. So I can buy a bond for $100, loan the government $100, and in a specified length of time, I can get that $100 back plus interest. And the interest is paid on market rates, just supply and demand. That is a bond. The U.S. Treasury issues 3 types of bonds to raise the money for their shortfalls. They are called T-bills. Those mature in a year or less. T-notes. Those mature in 2 to 10 years or increments within that. And then T-bonds, which are what are called long bonds. Those mature in 20 or 30 years. Now, I won't get into the nitty-gritty of how bonds are sold and how they work, etc. But the point is, these 3 types of federal securities are the main ways the government borrows. And the borrowing and the interest on those bonds, they accumulate. So last year, the federal government had to come up with $1.9 trillion. They then issued bonds in that amount, which added to the bonds they issued the last time they had a shortfall, and so on and so on and so on. This accumulation of bonds is called the national debt. Currently, the national debt is $36 trillion. That's how much. It's also $100,000 per family that you owe on top of your mortgage and your credit cards and everything else. To whom? Who buys these bonds? Well, you and I do. If you take part in like a managed fund, like a 401k or something, Americans own 2/3 of those bonds. A single individual can. Warren Buffett owns a lot of them. It is estimated that $5.5 trillion of that debt is owned just by mutual funds and retirement plans. Another $6 trillion is held by the Warren Buffetts and the Elon Musks of the world, as well as individuals. A third of it is held by foreign countries. Japan is the single is a country with the single most at over 1.1 trillion. China owns 800 billion, but they've been selling them. The European Union, led by the United Kingdom, owns about 2.6 trillion. So they're the most foreign holder by the group. So who pays them back? Well, the taxpayer, you and me. We're paying back ourselves. But here's the sinister part of our national debt and why this whole thing is a ticking time bomb. All those bonds I just told you about are what's called debt held by the public. They are debt securities that anyone on earth can buy. Well, about 20% of the debt is in the form of intragovernmental debt, or money owed government programs that collect more money than was needed, like Social Security. For decades now, Social Security, FICA, which I mentioned earlier, the Social Security taxes, have taken in more than it needs to pay out its benefits on the other side. Congress, their fingers hopelessly sticky, would then take that extra money and spend it on other things, leaving an IOU in the Social Security Trust Fund. Today, the federal government owes the Social Security Trust Fund almost $3 trillion of that debt. So that's 10% of everything that's owed. Because of these IOUs and other factors, it is estimated that Social Security will not meet its obligations by 2035. Okay, that's only in 10 years, folks. And when it can't do that, the benefits that it pays out will be automatically reduced by more than 16%. So this has already been the case with Medicare. By robbing Peter to pay Paul, Mary is going to have her direct deposit reduced. And this is just the impact of one government program. I haven't begun to speculate on the likely repercussions of a national debt load that is already the same as our national output, our gross domestic product. They're the same. If people in foreign nations don't think that the U.S. can pay its bond obligations, they'll liquidate their holdings, and then all those bonds will become worthless and will fall off a cliff. Remember, already $950 billion annually, or 20% of all the taxes, are going to pay these obligations, the minimum balance on a credit card. So I hope I've increased your anxiety. More anxiety over this issue is sorely needed today because firing up that credit card is very much the mentality of our president and Congress. There are solid ways to address federal spending and debt. We'll talk more about them in the weeks to come. Until then, keep it free.